Right now, in this exact moment, something is trying to reach you. And it has been trying for far longer than you realize. Not through some dramatic sign written across the sky. Not through a voice booming down from the heavens. But through the quiet, persistent language the universe has always spoken in, a language most people move through their entire lives without ever learning to hear. And the fact that you are here, listening to these words at this precise point in your life, is not coincidence. It is not randomness. It is not an algorithm accidentally placing this video in front of you. It is the latest signal in a sequence that has been building for a very long time, growing stronger, growing louder, increasing in intensity until it finally brought you to the threshold you are standing on right now. And here is the part almost no one tells you about thresholds like this. They have windows. Not because the universe is cruel. Not because some cosmic countdown is trying to punish you if you miss your chance. But because everything in existence moves in cycles. Energy moves in cycles. Consciousness moves in cycles. And every cycle has peaks, moments where the distance between who you are now and who you are capable of becoming becomes incredibly thin. Moments where a single decision, a single shift in awareness, can collapse that entire distance instantly. You are standing inside one of those moments now. And if something inside you reacts while hearing these words, if there is a strange stirring in your chest, a quickening in your attention, a feeling that something recognizes itself here, that sensation is not anxiety. It is resonance. It is the part of you that already knows what the rest of you is only beginning to remember. So let me ask you something, and answer honestly, not to me, but to yourself. Have things felt different lately? Not vaguely different. Not in the ordinary sense of stress or routine change. I mean different in ways that are difficult to explain to anyone else. Maybe you've been waking up at strange hours. 2 a.m., 3 a.m. For in the morning, not from nightmares, not from noise, but from some invisible internal alarm that pulls you awake. Into a silence that feels charged, electric, alive with something you cannot quite name. Maybe you've started noticing repeating numbers, patterns appearing so consistently that dismissing them as coincidence feels less rational than believing they actually mean something. Maybe relationships that once felt stable have begun shifting unexpectedly. Certain people pulling away, others appearing suddenly. Entire dynamics rearranging themselves as though some invisible intelligence is orchestrating it beneath the surface. Maybe your body has been reacting in strange ways. Tingling in your hands, pressure between your eyes, a low humming in your ears that comes and goes like a frequency being tuned. And if any of this sounds familiar, then listen carefully. You are not losing your mind. You are not broken. You are not simply going through some random difficult season of life. You are being signaled. And the signal is becoming louder because you have not fully responded yet. But this is where the misunderstanding begins. Because when people hear the word warning, they immediately think danger, threat, catastrophe approaching from outside themselves. But the warning the universe sends is not about danger approaching from outside. It is about alignment approaching from within. It is the universe whispering, "You are closer than you have ever been. Do not turn back now. Do not fall asleep again. Do not let the noise of the old world drag you back into patterns that never truly belong to you." The warning is not a threat. It is an invitation delivered with urgency. And the urgency is real, not because something terrible will happen if you miss this moment, but because something extraordinary will be delayed. And deep down, you already know you have delayed long enough. Think about how many times you felt it before. Those brief moments when reality suddenly felt transparent, when for a second you could sense that life was larger, deeper, more alive than the version you had been living. Those flashes where everything almost made sense, where you could feel the hidden architecture beneath reality, humming quietly underneath ordinary life, only to watch the feeling disappear again as the noise of the world pulled you back into routine. Every one of those moments was a signal. Every one was the universe tapping you gently on the shoulder and whispering, "Not yet, but soon." And now, soon has arrived. The whisper has become impossible to ignore, which is exactly why you are here, hearing these words at this particular moment in your life. But let's go deeper, because understanding what is actually happening changes everything. Quantum physics has begun revealing something mystics have tried to describe for thousands of years. Reality is not made of separate solid objects moving through empty space. At the deepest level, existence behaves like a vast interconnected field, a living web of energy and information where everything influences everything else instantly, regardless of distance. What we experience as physical matter, as solid reality, is actually structured patterns held in place through observation, consciousness, and attention. This is not poetry. This is what the double-slit experiment demonstrated more than a century ago, and what modern quantum experiments continue confirming. Observation collapses possibility into form. The wave becomes particle. Potential becomes reality. The invisible becomes visible. And what determines which possibility emerges? The observer. You. Your consciousness is not a passive witness watching reality unfold from the outside. It is participating in the creation of reality every moment of your life. Every thought you repeat, every belief you hold, every emotional state you sustain, is selecting one version of reality out of infinite possibilities and pulling it into lived experience. Most people do this unconsciously, but something inside you is beginning to wake up to the fact that this process is happening. And this is exactly where it connects to the strange sensations you've been feeling lately. The synchronicities, the urgency, the sense that something in your life is building toward a crescendo. Because the quantum field is not static. It moves in waves. It pulses. It breathes. Just like the ocean has tides, the field moves through cycles of contraction and expansion moments, where certain frequencies become amplified and certain possibilities become dramatically more accessible. Ancient civilizations understood this deeply. Entire cultures were built around aligning human action with these larger cycles of the living universe. They knew there were periods, windows, portals, if you want to call them that, where the field became unusually responsive to conscious intention. Moments where the amount of energy required to shift from one reality pattern into another became radically smaller. And you are standing inside one of those windows right now. The synchronicities you've been seeing, the disruptions, the strange sensations in your body, the dreams that feel more vivid than waking life itself. None of these are random. They are signs that the field around you is reorganizing. Evidence that your energy signature is changing, that the old frequency you've been broadcasting for years is beginning to lose coherence, while a new one struggles to emerge. The universe is not warning you because you are in danger. It is warning you because you are in transition. And transition is the most delicate stage of any transformation, because it is the moment where you either complete the shift or collapse back into the old pattern once again. And this is why what you are feeling right now matters so much. Because transformation does not announce itself the way most people expect it to. It rarely arrives as instant clarity, dramatic certainty, or a perfect plan suddenly appearing in your mind. Most of the time, transformation feels like confusion, like pressure, like standing in the middle of a life that no longer fits while the next version of reality has not fully formed yet. And that uncomfortable space in between, that is where almost everyone turns back. Because from the perspective of the old self, transition feels dangerous. It feels unstable. The mind begins searching desperately for evidence that things are improving. Where are the results? Where's the proof? Why does everything still feel uncertain? But nature has always transformed this way. Water does not become steam gradually. For a long time, heat builds invisibly beneath the surface while nothing appears to change. Then suddenly, after enough internal restructuring has occurred, the entire state shifts at once. The same thing happens to a caterpillar before it becomes a butterfly. Inside the cocoon, it does not simply grow wings while remaining the same creature. It dissolves completely. Its old structure literally breaks apart into biological chaos before a new form emerges. And if you could observe only the middle of that process without understanding what was happening, you would assume destruction was taking place instead of transformation. That is exactly where many of you are now. You think your life is falling apart because the old structure is dissolving faster than the new structure has stabilized. But the discomfort is not evidence that you are moving in the wrong direction. It is evidence that the old pattern can no longer contain the person you are becoming. So if this message is resonating with you, if something inside you recognizes these words on a level deeper than logic, take a second and subscribe to the channel. Not because you need another source of information, but because there will be moments where the noise returns, moments where the old reality feels louder than the truth you are beginning to sense now. And in those moments, you will need reminders. You will need places that pull your awareness back toward what your deeper self already knows. Because what is happening to you is not random. And the more consciously you move through this transition, the less suffering you create by resisting it. Which brings us to something most people completely misunderstand about awakening and manifestation. People think responding to the signal means immediately making dramatic external changes. Quitting the job, leaving the relationship, moving to another city, reinventing their entire life overnight. But external action is not the first response. Internal state is. Reality responds to your state of being long before it responds to your actions. Because your actions are only surface expressions of the deeper frequency you are already embodying internally. Most human beings spend their entire lives trapped inside what could be called a default frequency, a baseline emotional and psychological pattern built from childhood conditioning, repeated thoughts, inherited beliefs, emotional wounds, social programming, and unconscious habits. Over time, that pattern becomes so familiar that people mistake it for their actual identity. They think, this is just who I am. But it is not who they are. It is simply the emotional atmosphere they have practiced the longest. And the signal reaching you now is trying to interrupt that atmosphere. It is trying to pull you out of automatic existence and into conscious participation with reality itself. Which is why your first response cannot simply be external movement. Your first response must be awareness. You have to begin noticing the old emotional loops while they are happening instead of becoming lost inside them unconsciously. Notice how quickly your mind returns to fear. Notice the stories it repeats automatically. Notice how often your body prepares for disappointment before anything has even happened yet. These patterns are not your intuition. They are memorized survival strategies from an older version of you. And if you can observe them without immediately obeying them, something extraordinary begins happening. The pattern starts losing power. Because unconscious patterns survive through identification. They need you to believe they are you. The moment awareness enters the loop, separation begins. You stop being the fear and start witnessing the fear. You stop becoming the anxiety and begin observing the anxiety. And in that small but profound shift, the old frequency begins destabilizing. This is the true beginning of transformation. Not forcing positivity. Not pretending darkness does not exist. But becoming conscious enough to stop feeding old realities with automatic emotional energy. So I want you to do something simple right now. Think about the emotional pattern you return to most often when life becomes uncertain. Is it fear? Control? People-pleasing? Self-doubt? Scarcity? The need to shrink yourself so others feel comfortable? Whatever it is, just notice it honestly. Because naming the pattern is the first step in loosening its grip. And if you feel comfortable, write it in the comments below. Not as a confession of weakness, but as a declaration that you are beginning to see the old program clearly. Awareness changes everything. The moment the hidden becomes visible, transformation has already begun. But there is another layer to this that becomes even more important. Because awareness alone is not enough if the body itself is still broadcasting survival. You cannot think your way into a new reality while your nervous system remains trapped inside the emotional memory of the old one. This is why presence matters so deeply. Presence is not passive. It is not doing nothing. Presence is the act of fully inhabiting this moment without dragging the psychological weight of the past into it. And when you do that, even briefly, your entire field begins reorganizing. Your breathing changes. Your heart rhythm changes. Your brain chemistry changes. The signal you send into reality changes. And reality responds. And this is why presence changes everything. Because when you become fully present, truly present, you stop feeding reality from the emotional memory of the past. Most people think they are responding to life as it is happening now, but they are not. They are responding to echoes, to old wounds, to emotional programs written years ago that continue replaying automatically beneath awareness. The body remembers disappointment. It remembers rejection. It remembers fear. And without realizing it, people spend years broadcasting those memories into the quantum field as though the past is still happening now. That is why two people can stand inside the exact same moment and experience completely different realities. One person sees possibility. The other sees danger. One feels expansion. The other feels contraction, not because life itself changed, but because the state through which they are perceiving life changed. This is why the ancients spoke so deeply about the heart. Not metaphorically, literally. Modern research from the HeartMath Institute revealed something astonishing. The electromagnetic field generated by the human heart is measurable several feet outside the body and is up to 5,000 times more powerful magnetically than the field generated by the brain. Think about what that means. Your emotional state is not trapped inside your skin. It radiates. It influences the field around you continuously. And when the heart and brain move into coherence, when thought, emotion, and presence begin aligning together, the signal you transmit into reality becomes dramatically stronger and more organized. This is why moments of deep gratitude, love, peace, or authentic clarity can alter your life so quickly. Not because the universe is rewarding positive thinking, but because coherence changes the structure of the signal itself. The field responds differently to order than it does to internal chaos. And right now, the signal reaching you is trying to guide you toward that coherence. Not toward perfection, not toward becoming endlessly positive or spiritually superior. Toward alignment, toward inner congruence, toward becoming emotionally honest enough to stop fighting yourself internally while asking reality to change externally. So for a moment, breathe slowly. Bring your attention away from the noise in your mind and into the center of your chest. Not as imagination. Actually feel the space there. Breathe into it gently. Again, slower this time. And notice what begins happening. The mind softens. The nervous system shifts. Something inside you begins settling into the present moment instead of racing ahead into fear or backward into memory. This is not a small thing. This is the doorway. Because the field responds most powerfully not when you are forcing reality through effort, but when your entire system becomes internally coherent enough to receive a different possibility. Most people are trying to create a new life while emotionally remaining loyal to the old one. They say they want peace while rehearsing anxiety all day long. They say they want abundance while constantly preparing for loss. They say they want love while remaining emotionally armored against vulnerability. But reality responds less to words than to embodied state. The field listens to what you are being far more than what you are saying, which is why the transformation happening inside you now is so important. You are beginning to notice the gap between your conscious desires and your unconscious emotional patterns. And once that gap becomes visible, you can no longer fully pretend not to see it. Awareness changes the game permanently. But there is another reason the signal has become louder lately. Because something in you is finally close enough to the threshold that reality itself is beginning to reorganize in response. This is where synchronicities begin accelerating. Conversations arrive at impossible timing. Books open to the exact sentence you needed. Songs speak directly into your current emotional state. Certain people disappear while others suddenly enter your life, carrying the exact frequency required for the next phase of your transformation. None of this is accidental. It is resonance. Just like two tuning forks vibrating at the same pitch begin activating each other automatically, reality begins arranging itself around the state you are becoming internally. And the closer you move toward alignment, the more obvious this becomes. The field starts echoing back confirmation after confirmation, not to convince you, but to help you trust what your deeper self already knows. So if things have felt unusually intense lately, emotionally, spiritually, physically, it is not because you are failing. It is because the wave is already here, and the universe is no longer whispering. It is trying to get your full attention before you drift back into unconscious sleep again. But here is the beautiful part. You are not being asked to create the wave. The wave already exists. You are only being asked to stop resisting it long enough to stand up and let it carry you. And this is where most people misunderstand the wave completely. They think the universe is asking them to create something through force, to push harder, hustle harder, control more, become more disciplined, more strategic, more perfect. But the wave does not ask you to create it. The wave is already moving. The current is already here. The only question is whether you are willing to stop resisting it long enough to let it carry you somewhere new. Think about a surfer standing in the ocean. They do not manufacture the wave. They do not control the tide. They do not force the ocean into motion through effort or willpower. Their entire art is learning to recognize the wave when it arrives, to align with its momentum, and to stand up at precisely the right moment instead of fighting against the movement already unfolding beneath them. That is what this stage of your life actually is. Not a demand for more force, a demand for deeper alignment. And this is why the old frequency feels so heavy now. Because the old frequency was built entirely around resistance. Resistance to uncertainty. Resistance to vulnerability. Resistance to being seen fully. Resistance to trusting yourself. Most people spend years waiting to feel completely ready before allowing themselves to move forward. They wait for permission, for guarantees, for certainty. They shrink themselves into versions that feel acceptable to everyone around them, because deep down they fear what might happen if they finally become fully visible. But the signal reaching you now is trying to pull you out of that shrinking. It is trying to show you that the life you are searching for cannot emerge while you continue organizing yourself around fear. And maybe this realization hurts a little, because some part of you already knows how much of your life has been shaped by survival instead of truth. How many decisions were made to avoid rejection rather than to honor your soul? How many times you silenced your own knowing just to maintain stability, comfort, or approval? But none of that means you failed. It simply means you adapted the best way you knew how. The old patterns were not weakness. They were protection. They were survival strategies created by earlier versions of you trying to navigate pain without the awareness you have now. And this is important to understand because healing does not happen through self-hatred. Transformation does not happen through violence against yourself. You do not evolve by declaring war on the old version of you. You evolve by recognizing that the old version carried you as far as it could and then gently allowing it to rest. This is why compassion matters so deeply during awakening. Not sentimental compassion, honest compassion, the kind that can look directly at fear, control, shame, scarcity, people-pleasing, or emotional armor, and instead of reacting with disgust, simply say, I understand why you existed, but I no longer need you to lead my life. And something extraordinary begins happening the moment you do that. The nervous system relaxes. The internal war quiets. Energy that was trapped in resistance begins becoming available for creation instead of survival. This is when reality truly starts reorganizing. Not because you manipulated the field through force, but because you stopped broadcasting conflict into it constantly. So let me ask you something deeper now. Can you remember the first time in your life you sensed there was something more waiting for you? Not as fantasy, not as ego ambition, but as a quiet knowing you could never fully explain. Maybe you felt it as a child staring at the night sky. Maybe during a heartbreak that cracked open your old reality. Maybe in a moment of silence where life suddenly felt infinitely larger than the version everyone around you accepted as normal. That feeling mattered. It was real, and it has been trying to guide you this entire time. But the world trained you to mistrust it, to prioritize logic over intuition, productivity over presence, safety over aliveness. And slowly, almost without noticing, you learned how to disconnect from your own signal just to survive inside systems that rewarded conformity. Yet no matter how far you drifted, something inside you never stopped remembering. That is why the signal feels so emotional now. Because this is not just about creating a different future. It is about reconnecting with a part of yourself that was buried beneath years of conditioning. And the reconnection can feel overwhelming at first because the body still carries the old emotional weight. So right now, notice where you feel the old frequency most strongly in your body. Maybe it sits in your chest like pressure. Maybe in your stomach like tension. Maybe in your jaw, your shoulders, your throat. The body always reveals what the mind tries to hide. And instead of fighting those sensations, simply observe them. Breathe into them. Let them exist without immediately trying to fix them. Because awareness itself begins dissolving what resistance kept solid. This is the paradox almost nobody understands. What you stop resisting starts transforming. And this is where time itself begins feeling strange during awakening. Because once you start stepping outside the old emotional loops, linear reality no longer feels as stable as it once did. Moments begin collapsing together differently. Synchronicities increase. Future possibilities start pulling on you before they physically arrive. It almost feels as though another version of you already exists somewhere ahead, calling you toward it. And in a way, that is exactly what is happening. The future self you are becoming is not passive. It is already exerting influence backward through your awareness, trying to pull you into alignment with the reality where it already exists. Which is why so many people feel these signals intensify late at night, especially around midnight. Not because midnight itself is magical, but because midnight symbolizes a threshold, the crossing point between one day and another, one identity and another, one reality and another. And your consciousness understands symbolism far more deeply than your logical mind realizes. Midnight is not just a clock time. It is an inner doorway, a moment where the old reality becomes thin enough for something new to enter. And this is the point where almost everything inside you will want to tighten its grip again. Because standing at the threshold between an old reality and a new one feels unbearable to the part of you that was trained to survive through control. The mind immediately starts asking questions. What exactly should I do? What if I make the wrong decision? What if I let go and everything falls apart? But the deeper truth is this. The moment you reach the fulcrum of real transformation, the answer is almost never more control. The answer is surrender. And surrender is one of the most misunderstood words in the human experience. Most people hear surrender and imagine weakness, passivity, giving up. But true surrender has nothing to do with defeat. It is the willingness to stop fighting reality long enough to let a higher order reorganize itself through you. It is the moment you finally release your grip on the exact shape your transformation is supposed to take. Because the old mind always wants guarantees before it moves. It wants to know the outcome before taking the step. It wants certainty before trust. But the field does not respond to certainty. It responds to openness, to receptivity, to the willingness to move without seeing the entire staircase in advance. Think about how exhausting it has been trying to control every possibility in your life, trying to predict every outcome, trying to keep yourself emotionally protected from disappointment, rejection, uncertainty, pain. At some point, survival mode becomes its own prison. And many of you are beginning to feel that now. You are realizing that the strategies which once kept you safe are also the very things preventing you from becoming fully alive. So right now, I want you to imagine something. Picture the thing you are gripping most tightly in your life. Maybe it is a relationship, a future outcome, an identity, a fear, a version of yourself you are terrified to release. Imagine holding it in your hand right now, clenching it so tightly your entire body feels tense around it. And now slowly, gently, open your hand. Not because you no longer care, but because you are finally willing to stop strangling life in order to feel safe. Breathe into that feeling for a moment. Notice the discomfort that appears. The nervous system does not like surrender at first because it confuses openness with danger. But stay with it, because what you are actually feeling is the collapse of resistance. And once resistance begins dissolving, the field reorganizes astonishingly fast. This is why so many people experience sudden breakthroughs immediately after they finally let go. Not because the universe was withholding blessings as punishment, but because their own contraction had stopped the flow of possibility from fully entering their reality. The moment the contraction relaxes, movement returns. And here is the paradox. Surrender is not what happens after certainty arrives. Surrender is what allows certainty to emerge. You stop trying to force the next chapter into existence and instead allow yourself to become available to it. This is where your highest possibilities begin finding you. Not through struggle, through alignment, through internal openness, through the willingness to stop micromanaging the intelligence that already knows how to move your life forward far better than the fearful mind ever could. And yes, this can feel terrifying at first, because surrender means the old self loses authority. The identity built entirely around control begins dissolving. And for a moment, it can feel like freefall. But what if the freefall is actually flight beginning? What if the reason everything feels unstable is because the old ground was never meant to hold the next version of you permanently? Caterpillars probably experience the cocoon as death before they experience it as transformation. Seeds probably experience the breaking of their shell as destruction before they understand it as growth. And human consciousness is no different. The breakdown often feels catastrophic while it is happening because the old mind cannot interpret emergence correctly. It only knows how to interpret loss. But something deeper inside you already understands. That is why even in the middle of confusion, some quiet part of you keeps whispering, keep going. even when you cannot logically explain why, even when the path ahead is unclear. Because the signal reaching you is not trying to destroy your life. It is trying to liberate it from the structures that can no longer contain who you are becoming. And this is the part almost nobody prepares you for. Because once the shift truly begins, once you stop resisting the signal and start aligning with it, your external reality may not become peaceful immediately. In fact, for a period of time, things can feel even more chaotic than before. This is where many people panic and assume they made the wrong choice. But what you are witnessing is not failure. It is reorganization. Think about water right before it transforms into steam. The molecules do not become calmer as the phase transition approaches. They become more active, more unstable, more intense. Energy increases before the state changes. And human transformation follows the same principle. When your internal frequency begins changing, the structures in your external life that were built around the old version of you begin losing coherence. Some relationships may start falling away. Certain habits suddenly feel unbearable. Environments that once felt normal begin draining you. Conversations you used to tolerate now feel painfully misaligned. This can be deeply uncomfortable because part of you still wants the old world to remain intact while simultaneously stepping into a new reality. But transformation does not work that way. The new self cannot fully emerge while every old structure remains untouched. And yes, there is grief in that realization. Real grief. Because awakening is not only about gaining something new. It is also about mourning what can no longer continue with you. Some people will not understand the changes happening inside you. Some relationships were built entirely around old wounds, old identities, old survival dynamics. And when those dynamics begin dissolving, the connection itself may start weakening too. This does not mean anyone is evil. It does not mean you must suddenly abandon your entire life. It simply means resonance is changing. And when resonance changes, reality reorganizes accordingly. But the hardest part is not always losing external things. Often, the hardest part is losing familiarity itself. Human beings become emotionally attached, even to suffering if suffering feels predictable. Familiar pain can feel safer than unfamiliar freedom. This is why so many people unconsciously sabotage transformation right before breakthrough. The nervous system starts interpreting expansion as danger simply because it is unknown. And this is the moment where awareness matters more than ever. Because if you misunderstand the turbulence, you will try to freeze yourself back into the old state. You will see temporary discomfort and assume you should retreat. But imagine heating water while continuously throwing ice back into the pot every few minutes. The temperature never stabilizes long enough for transformation to complete. That is exactly what happens when people begin awakening but repeatedly collapse back into old emotional patterns out of fear. They interrupt their own emergence. So hear this clearly. Do not measure your transformation by temporary external chaos. Measure it by your internal relationship to that chaos. Are you becoming more aware, more present, more honest with yourself, more capable of observing fear without immediately obeying it? These are the real signs that the shift is happening. Not perfection, not constant happiness. Real transformation often looks messy in the middle because the old reality is dissolving before the new one fully crystallizes. And there may be moments during this process where you feel completely exhausted. Not ordinary tiredness, but soul-level exhaustion. Like your entire identity is being rewritten beneath the surface while your conscious mind struggles to keep up. If that happens, be gentle with yourself. Your system is processing far more than you realize. The body, the nervous system, the subconscious mind, all of it is reorganizing simultaneously. This is why rest becomes sacred during awakening. Silence becomes sacred. Solitude becomes sacred. Not because you are withdrawing from life permanently, but because something inside you is recalibrating. Think about how much energy it takes for a seed to break through its shell underground before anyone sees even the smallest sign of growth above the surface. Most transformation is invisible while it is happening. And because it is invisible, people often judge themselves too early. They assume nothing is changing because they cannot yet see physical proof. But the deepest changes always begin beneath visibility. Roots form before branches appear. Internal coherence forms before external results emerge. So if you feel like everything is shifting inside you while the outer world has not fully caught up yet, do not panic. That gap is normal. That space between internal transformation and external manifestation is where integration happens. And integration cannot be rushed. The caterpillar cannot force the butterfly to emerge before the process is complete. The nervous system cannot instantly adapt to an entirely new level of consciousness overnight. There is a period where you must simply remain present enough to let the transformation stabilize. And this is why the signal keeps returning to you. Through synchronicities, through intuition, through moments of deep emotional recognition, through conversations like this. Because some deeper intelligence understands that the old version of your life is already ending, even if part of you is still trying to hold on to it. And the more you trust the process instead of resisting it, the more gracefully the transition unfolds. And if you continue walking through this transition consciously, there are 3 things you will almost certainly begin noticing more and more clearly. The first is an intensification of sensation. Your body may suddenly feel more sensitive than it ever has before. Waves of heat moving through you for no obvious reason. Chills appearing out of nowhere. Tingling in the hands. Pressure in the chest. Sudden emotional releases that seem disproportionate to the moment itself. You may cry without fully understanding why. Not because something is wrong, but because old emotional density that has been stored in the nervous system for years is finally beginning to move. Many people misunderstand this stage because they assume awakening should feel calm all the time. But real transformation often begins by bringing buried material to the surface. The body cannot carry suppressed emotion forever without eventually asking to release it. And when that release starts happening, it can feel overwhelming if you do not understand the process. But here is the important part. The release is not the problem. The resistance to the release is what creates suffering. Think about how much of human life is spent trying not to feel, distracting, numbing, escaping, staying busy enough to avoid silence because silence might reveal what has been waiting underneath all along. Yet the moment you finally allow yourself to feel fully without immediately shutting the experience down, something profound begins changing. The emotional charge starts dissolving. The nervous system stops treating old pain like an active emergency. And the energy that was trapped maintaining suppression becomes available again for presence, creativity, connection, and life itself. The second thing that often happens during this stage is that the shadow rises. Memories you thought you had forgotten suddenly return. Old fears reappear. Patterns you believed you already healed show themselves one more time. And many people panic when this happens because they assume it means they are moving backward. But the opposite is usually true. The shadow does not rise to punish you. It rises because you are finally strong enough to face what was previously buried beneath survival. Healing is not the permanent absence of darkness. It is the ability to remain conscious while darkness passes through without becoming consumed by it. And every time you stay present with an old wound, instead of collapsing into unconscious reaction, you loosen its grip on your identity a little more. This is why awakening often feels cyclical. Layers reveal themselves gradually. Each time you believe you have arrived at the final version of yourself, another deeper layer asks to be seen. Not because you are broken, but because consciousness is infinite. There is always more of you waiting beneath the surface. And the third thing you will begin noticing is that the external world starts reorganizing itself in increasingly undeniable ways. Synchronicities multiply. Unexpected opportunities appear. Certain doors close abruptly while others open almost effortlessly. People enter your life carrying exactly the insight, lesson, or support required for the next stage of your growth. Conversations happen at impossible timing. You think about someone moments before they call. You ask a question internally and the answer arrives through a stranger, a book, a dream, or a single sentence you were somehow meant to hear. None of this is random. The field is responding to your changing state of consciousness. And the more coherent you become internally, the more reality begins reflecting that coherence externally. This does not mean life suddenly becomes perfect. Challenges still exist. Pain still exists. Uncertainty still exists. But your relationship to them changes completely. You stop seeing obstacles as punishment and begin seeing them as part of the intelligence guiding your expansion. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and begin asking, "What is this trying to show me?" And that shift alone changes the entire trajectory of a human life. Because the moment you stop resisting every difficult experience as though it should not exist, you begin extracting wisdom from places where you once found only suffering. This is why the signal found you now. Not because you are weak, not because you need saving, but because some deeper part of you is finally ready to participate consciously in your own evolution. And once that process truly begins, the old reality can never fully contain you again. So now, after everything you have felt while listening to this, after every memory, sensation, realization, and quiet recognition that may have surfaced inside you, there is only one thing left. A decision. Not a dramatic external decision that needs to be announced to the world tonight. Not some performance of transformation. A deeper decision than that. The decision to stop abandoning yourself every time life becomes uncertain. The decision to stop returning to emotional patterns that were built for survival but were never meant to become your permanent identity. Because this moment right here, this exact moment, is a threshold. And thresholds are powerful because they reveal who you become when the old reality no longer fully holds you. But the new reality has not completely formed yet. Most people reach thresholds and immediately retreat back into distraction, noise, familiar suffering, and unconscious repetition because uncertainty terrifies the nervous system. But some people stay. Some people breathe through the discomfort instead of running from it. Some people allow the old version of themselves to dissolve without demanding immediate proof of what comes next. And those people are the ones whose entire reality eventually changes. So right now, I want you to do something simple. Bring your attention inward for a moment. Feel everything that has been moving inside you during this message. The fear, the exhaustion, the hope, the grief, the possibility, the strange feeling that something larger than your logical mind has been trying to guide you here for a very long time. Now imagine gathering all of it together, every fragmented piece of yourself, into a single point of awareness in the center of your chest. Breathe into that space slowly. Again, and as you breathe, silently make a decision. Not for anyone else to hear, just for yourself. Decide that you are no longer willing to organize your life entirely around fear. Decide that you are no longer willing to shrink your consciousness just to maintain emotional familiarity. Decide that even if the path ahead is uncertain, you would rather walk into the unknown awake than spend the rest of your life asleep inside patterns that no longer belong to you. Because the truth is, the signal was never trying to control you. It was trying to wake you up. And the moment you consciously respond to it, something begins shifting immediately. Not always externally at first, but internally, at the level where all external realities are eventually born. Your nervous system begins recalibrating. Your attention changes. Your emotional baseline changes. The possibilities you notice change. The people you attract change. The opportunities you feel drawn toward change. Because the field responds to who you are becoming, not just who you have been. This is why even a single genuine internal decision can alter the trajectory of an entire life. Most people underestimate the power of inner commitment because they are conditioned to believe only visible action matters. But every external transformation is first created invisibly inside consciousness itself. Every revolution begins internally before it appears physically. Every new reality begins as an energetic shift before it becomes material experience. And whether you realize it or not, that shift has already started happening inside you. That is why these words affected you the way they did. The old frequency could not fully resonate with this message anymore because some deeper part of you already recognizes the new one emerging beneath it. So trust that, even if you do not fully understand it yet. Trust the strange pull you have been feeling. Trust the synchronicities. Trust the moments of stillness where something inside you suddenly feels profoundly alive again. Trust the exhaustion that forced you to stop pretending. Trust the breakdowns that cracked open identities too small for your future. Trust the intuition that keeps whispering there is more waiting for you than the life you have settled for until now. Because there is. And this is not about becoming someone entirely different. It is about becoming fully available to who you have always been underneath the conditioning, fear, and survival patterns. The universe is not asking you to become more worthy. It is asking you to stop forgetting yourself. And maybe that is what awakening truly is. Not acquiring something new, but remembering something ancient that was buried beneath noise for a very long time. So tonight, whether it is midnight where you are or not, let this be a crossing point, a quiet inner declaration that you are ready to move differently now, ready to listen differently, ready to stop fighting the transformation already unfolding inside you. And if this message found you at exactly the moment you needed it, leave one word in the comments that represents the reality you are stepping into now, not as performance, as commitment. And subscribe if you want to continue walking deeper into these conversations together, because there is another layer to all of this waiting for you. A deeper understanding of how attention itself shapes reality, how consciousness interacts with possibility, and why the state you repeatedly return to internally eventually becomes the world you live inside externally. Until then, remember this: midnight was never a deadline. It was always a doorway, and something inside you has already begun walking through it.